She is strong. She is capable. Her partner is capable. She is loved. The seasons turn, the nights pass, others carry life. She carries only silence. In a world defined by the next generation, she is an anomaly. The tribe watched. The whispers began. The nights grew cold. This is the case of the woman the ancestors couldn't explain. For 30,000 years, the logic of the tribe was absolute. It was a cold, mathematical equation. The environment was not a playground. It was a hungry machine that demanded constant fuel. That fuel was human labor, human resilience, and human propagation. Every healthy woman was an engine, expected to produce the future. A child was not just a symbol of love. It was a unit of survival, a future hunter, a future gatherer, a future protector. To not produce was to be a drag on the system. Imagine the pressure. Not the subtle modern anxiety of a doctor's appointment or a social expectation, but the physical weight of being a member of a group where every calorie mattered. She lived in a society where silence was not just awkward, it was a statistical failure. The tribe's survival rested on the ability to replenish its numbers, and here was a woman who, despite the rhythms of her body and the strength of her hands, was unable to contribute the one thing that was deemed essential. The forensic evidence shows that she wasn't necessarily cast out. That is a myth we project onto the past to make ourselves feel better about our own prejudices. In reality, the reaction was more complex. It was a mix of confusion, pity, and a growing, gnawing suspicion that something in the chain of survival had been broken. Think about the psychological toll. Every day she gathered. Every day she processed the kill. Every day she stood by the fire and watched other mothers nursing. She was an integral part of the machinery, but she was a gear that didn't turn. She was present, she was vital, but she was fundamentally disconnected from the central purpose of her existence. Every sunrise was a reminder. Every cry in the night was a verdict. She had to witness the cycle of life repeating itself in everyone but her. She was a silent spectator in her own life, surrounded by the proof of her own perceived biological failure. Drop a comment below. Does the silence of the past frighten you, or does it make you curious? I read them all, and your feedback shapes the next case file. Here is where the official story cracks. We assumed that if a woman couldn't reproduce, she was surplus to requirement. We assumed that ancient humanity, in its raw, unfiltered brutality, would have viewed her as a net loss to the collective ledger. We imagine a prehistoric boardroom meeting where the elders looked at her output and decided she was a liability. But that assumption is based on the flawed idea that humanity only survives through direct reproduction. It ignores the core mechanism that actually allowed us to conquer the planet. Look closer at the ledger. When you study the skeleton records and the archaeological sites of our ancestors, you don't find a history of discarding the unproductive. You find evidence of long-term care. You find evidence of individuals who survived decades past their reproductive prime. This challenges the entire premise of the survival machine. If reproduction was the only metric of success, why did these individuals persist? Why did the group bear the cost of feeding them? There is a concept in evolutionary biology called the grandmother hypothesis. For decades, it was buried under the weight of more masculine narratives of hunting and conquest. The theory suggests that human women, unlike almost every other primate, live long past their reproductive years. Why? Why would a survival machine keep an engine running long after the production line has stopped? The answer is not biological sentiment. It is forensic strategy. When we examine the survival data of ancient human groups, we find something startling. The groups that prospered were not just the ones with the highest number of births. They were the ones with the highest number of non-reproductive elders who could direct resources. A woman who was not busy nursing an infant of her own was, in the most ruthless, tactical sense, a surplus resource. She was a master of the landscape. She knew the location of the tubers. She knew the migration patterns of the small game. She knew the medicinal properties of the local flora. And most importantly, she had the bandwidth to care for the children of others. She became the safety net. She became the living database of the tribe's history and skills. She was the one who could teach, who could mediate, who could protect. Consider the energy cost of reproduction. It is massive. It creates a bottleneck where the mother is compromised, slower, and less efficient at the daily tasks of survival. In a group where a woman is infertile, that bottleneck does not exist. She is the ultimate mobile resource. If a mother died, the child had a chance. If the group faced a food shortage, the non-reproductive woman could prioritize the survival of the children over the survival of her own immediate health. She was the stabilizer. She was the one who could be counted on when the chaos of survival reached its peak. She wasn't a failure. She was the survival backbone. The forensic truth is that the unproductive woman was the most valuable asset a tribe could have. By not having her own children, she was freed from the biological drain of reproduction. She was free to invest her energy, her knowledge, and her survival instinct into the entire group. She lowered the mortality rate of the children who weren't hers. She ensured the stability of the camp. She was the reason the tribe survived the winter. Hold on to that thought. We're about to turn the investigation inward. We have spent centuries looking at these lives as tragedies, as incomplete stories, as failures of design. We have looked at the empty cradle and felt only the void. We have internalized the idea that if you are not actively creating, you are consuming. We have brought this fear into the modern world, where we measure our worth by our tangible outputs, our children, our careers, our legacies. We judge our existence by the same brutal metric the ancestors used, even if the tools have changed. But forensic science tells us we have been looking at it backward. The woman who couldn't have children was not a broken part of the system. She was the system's insurance policy. She was the reason the tribe didn't collapse under the weight of its own reproduction. She was the reason the children of the tribe lived to grow up and propagate the line. She was the invisible force that allowed the human species to push boundaries, to endure through the harsh cycles of the apocalypse, and to build something that lasted. We are not just the descendants of the ones who reproduced. We are the descendants of the ones who invested. We are the product of a collaborative survival mechanism that treated everyone as essential, even when it couldn't see the long-term value. You exist because of the ones who were supposed to be obsolete. You exist because of the women who could not have children but had the capacity to nurture the collective future. Think about your own life. Think about the people in your sphere, the aunts, the mentors, the friends, the ones who pour into the lives of others without the biological mandate to do so. We call them secondary. We call them supportive. The forensic record calls them vital. They are the architects of social stability. They are the ones who hold the thread when the main narrative threatens to snap. We are obsessed with making our mark. We want to leave a legacy, a physical trace, a direct descendant. But look at the history of the species. Most marks are erased. Most lineages are lost. The only thing that endures is the collective survival, the web of support, the intricate structure of the tribe. The ones who didn't reproduce weren't just helping out, they were holding the entire structure together. You are not just a collection of genes. You are the survivor of a strategy that understood something we are still struggling to grasp. You are the result of a tribe that knew that reproduction is only half the battle. The other half is the survival of the whole. And for that to happen, they needed the ones who could stand back, observe, teach, and protect. They were the masters of the long game. They understood that the tribe is not a snapshot. It is a film that plays out over generations. And the ones who didn't have their own children were the ones who could watch the screen, steer the narrative, and keep the projector running. She is strong, she is capable, she is loved. The cradle may have been empty, but the tribe was full. What if your own perceived shortcomings are just survival strategies you haven't audited yet? What if the things you think make you less than are actually the very traits that make you an asset to your own tribe? What if your anomalies are actually your greatest strategic advantages? If this file got under your skin, there is another one waiting in the evidence room. Stay on the case. The investigation continues. If this changed how you see your own ancestry and your own place in the ledger, the next file will too. Subscribe.